Hey everybody, I know that you probably noticed I haven't been posting as many videos lately. The reason why is because I've been digging heavy into some research regarding something fairly esoteric. Some may not think it is, but it actually is. It's all around the concept, the meaning of the Son of Man. A lot of people think that that just means Jesus. It's not true. But I'm going to go into that in a different video. It's rather in depth, and it may actually take several parts, but we're going to go through the Bible together. On the term Son of Man, we're going to look at the words in the Strong's Dictionary. We're going to take a look at how some of these words are broken down out of the Bible. Some of you may be surprised in finding out that what you may have thought meant something means something completely different when you start taking a look at the definition in Strong's. What I wanted to show you today real quick is I wanted to kind of go over this whole thing with the crucifixion, and I want to introduce to you some Christian alchemy. When I say Christian alchemy, there are many large cathedrals that have things just simply right in your face, but people just don't look. And when you start doing the exploration, if you guys know, I've been doing this for about a good 2 years, and my progress has been amazing at what I've discovered so far. I've really been digging into the whole alchemy thing, and I understand the hidden meanings a lot behind a lot of this stuff. What I am attempting to do here is, I've found that these various religions really divide people, and so I pretty much understand that this division should not be there. Because when we start looking into the esoteric meanings of things, we start taking a look into the real underlying and underpinning meanings of things, we find that they all pretty much tie back to the same thing. They all mean the same concepts. Some of these things are rather in-depth and many times very abstract. And when I say abstract, what I mean is that when these people a long time ago, when they had these visions, they had visions. They saw images. And these images were eventually interpreted into words. And at that point, the visions basically ran through what we might call a filter. And this filter basically is the words and language structure that we use today. The problem with words and language, as I've said before many times, is that a word is only as good as whatever the dictionary defines it as. So if the images are not limited like that, when you see an image in nature, when you see these correspondences all over the place, we find that an image has a whole abundance of different meanings, both abstract, spiritual, mental, physical, all of these things layered up on top of each other that can mean a whole complex understanding of a whole concept. When you start putting things into words, those images get run through filters, and they, as Alan Watts has said many times, these visions can be distorted and they become very subjective. So they go from the objective point of view, which is what nature or what is being presented by the universe, and then they run through this filter of our words and language structure, and that basically takes them and turns them into something that many times is incorrect. Now, what I've been doing for the last 2 years is pretty much building this huge library of images inside my head, so that when I see one thing, I can immediately, based on the theme, based on the general meaning, and the concepts and all that, I can immediately start thumbing through the associations of various pictures in my head to see what is similar. And you would be surprised if you would start doing that kind of thing, the amount of truth that you will come to. Because the words that are taught, for example, in the Bible, to the general public, they don't mean anything like what you see when you start looking into the Strong's dictionary, the other various meanings, and because words and language basically filter and tear things apart. So, and a lot of people always equate things to the physical. They always equate things to an object. Jesus is an object rather than Jesus as a concept, for example. So what I want to take a look at is, if you've noticed, I put a video out not too long ago called Crucifixion. The crucifixion video was to show you all this various art that you find for centuries regarding Jesus being crucified on this cross. Now, a lot of people think that it is a physical death, this crucifixion. But what it actually represents is it represents a point of spiritual enlightenment. We can take this all the way back to ancient Egypt. But I want you to notice the similarities that you see here is you always see Jesus on the cross, and you see the sun on one side, and you see the moon on the other side. The reason this is significant is because the sun, and this is alchemy, basically what you're looking at right here, on all these various pieces of art. This is alchemy, but the sun represents the masculine, the analytical, the logical, the sequential, sees the details, and so forth. The moon represents the feminine. It represents the intuitive. And so what the crucifixion actually means is it means the balance of the left and right brain, or the left and right hemisphere. Now, heart thinking, for example, heart thinking is simply symbolic of the intuitive, the feminine, the putting feeling into your thought. A lot of people think that it has something to do with an object. There's all this thing around heart math, magnetic fields, and so forth. I think there is something about that. However, figuratively and symbolically, what heart thinking actually represents does not have anything to do with the so-called neurons in your heart. What it represents is it represents putting feeling into your thought. And so when that happens, when you balance the left and right brain hemispheres, and what that basically means is this. Many of you are familiar with left brain folks. Left brain folks, they're very mathematical, they're very analytical, and they have everything that they learn that is new, and this is a scientific fact, the way the left brain works. Anything that is new, what they do is the left brain tries to keep the current model. So they take anything new and it must fold into the current model. In other words, it must make sense based on everything that they have already learned so far that has been accepted by the left brain. If it does not, then highly left brain people simply will deny it and throw it away. What that does is it causes consciousness to stagnate and stop. Now, what the right brain does, the right brain sees the whole picture. It sees the forest where the left brain sees the trees. It works like a multiprocessor or a parallel processor, randomly associating data and images and symbols and so forth. Where the left brain is the words and the language structure, the right brain is the images, the symbolism structure. And what it does is it constantly challenges the current model, constantly throwing new, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? Out there to the left brain. Now, the reason why the balance of the two is so important is because if the right brain is totally in charge, then you're going to only end up in just la-la land all the time. You have to have something to balance it. If the left brain is totally in charge, which is unfortunately what most of us are subject to today, if the left brain is totally in charge, then you pretty much stop at your level of consciousness. Because you just say, oh, that's not true. I just can't believe that. There's no way that can be true. But the bottom line is that you haven't allowed enough right brain expression to come in and start giving you more information. And you have to allow right brain expression enough to say, okay, well, fine, right brain. We're going to go ahead and go with this. Now, let's find some repeatability. Let's take a look. And so what happens is if you allow right brain expression enough to happen, then over time, then if it has proven itself, then you can now fold something new into your left brain of consciousness. And now it becomes something new, and now you've expanded your consciousness. That's the reason why you see Jesus on the cross between the sun and the moon. Now, what's interesting is you also see Mithra also in between the sun and the moon. It represents the same thing. And so this is what you see. You see crucifixion right here. Now, let's take a look at a little bit different alchemy. And by the way, I've got 250 of these that date back over the centuries. If you'd like to explore these on my Facebook. See Mithra, you got the sun on this side, the moon on this side, which has been ripped off apparently. No divine feminine there. But I've got just an enormous amount of these, just pretty much, just so much evidence showing that this is what it represents. And when we take a look inside the Bible, I'm using eSword right here, and eSword is great. It's got all of the King James Bible, King James Version Plus, because that allows you to look at the Strong's numbers, which we're going to do here in just a second. And I want to show you basically what, when you go look at crucified, and you take a look at the Strong's word there, what it basically says is to impale on a cross, but then it says figuratively to extinguish or subdue passion or selfishness. That also means crucify. So what has happened is they have taken it and they have turned it into something completely physical. But when you take a look at the esoteric alchemy, what you find is that crucifixion basically is referring to this second part, to extinguish or subdue passion or selfishness. Basically, what is happening is the lower part of the nervous system, the reptilian, the survival mode, that part is now being crucified. In other words, it is being crossed or interlaced with the higher mind. And so your selfishness, your passion is now dying in the sense of this crucifying happening. Once again, we have Jesus on the cross, and this is kind of a little mashup I did here to show you. Here's the left and right brain hemisphere representing the sun and the moon, Jesus on the cross. We're going to see how this makes a lot of sense here and some other alchemy here in just a second. The all-seeing eye that you always see inside the triangle, it represents the pineal gland, where it sits on the throne in between the two left and right thalamus. You're going to see it physically on in the brain. That this is exactly what is shown there. Now, R.A. Schwaller de Lubbock's, who studied the temple and man in Egypt and Luxor, one of his quotes, he said a long time ago, he says, in Egypt, in India, as well as later in the Christian cathedrals of the Gothic period, the temple was a book revealing esoteric teaching. This is true. Now, what we're going to see here is people think that this is pareidolia, but it's not. It's alchemy, and it's going to go into a little bit more detail than what you're seeing right here. But this, what you see right here, you see Jesus standing up. You see him holding this Chi-Rho symbol right here. That X right there represents crucifixion, and that crucifixion is basically what happens right before you enter into the higher mind. The reason it's said that in eSword, it says that, and their dead bodies shall lie in the street of this great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. Now, what I have shown you before is that in Egypt, there is the Nile that runs up to the Nile Delta, and that is where the pyramids are. Many people believe that Jesus was actually crucified, which means did his initiation inside the pyramids. The pyramids represent that mark, which is also physically the pyramids of the brain, where the brain stem moves into the base of the skull, and they are located exactly right where that would be, as you've seen the images I've shown you on that, and the nervous system. So basically, when it says that he was spiritually, or he was crucified spiritually in Egypt, you have to remember where Jesus was crucified was a place called Golgotha. Golgotha in Aramaic means place of the skull. So we're taking a look at these right here. This is one of them. Notice where Jesus is right here would represent the brainstem coming up, and then the third eye right here. This is one of Raphael's painting. What you find is that in these, even all the way back to ancient Egypt, you typically see the dome that's painted. And inside the dome, you have Jesus, which is usually crucified underneath, which represents the brainstem. So it represents that crossing between the death of the ego, or that crossing between the dark and the light, which occurs as we move from the reptilian brain up into the higher brain. And you see this dome, and then you always see, well, a lot of times what you'll see is God on one side and Jesus on the other. And I'll show you some more here. Here's a large cathedral right here. And so what these guys did, and if you're not familiar with alchemy, what alchemy basically is they hide things in art. And what's been hidden in art in a lot of these cathedrals is that they hide the nervous system. What you're looking at right here, this is St. Andrew. This cross that looks like an X right here was another way of representing the crucifixion. And it represents the crossing of the left and right brain hemisphere. A lot of people think that Jesus was the only one that received a crown. But that's not true. As you see right here, St. Andrew is also receiving a crown. But what this represents spiritually is a moving from the lower chakras to eventually the crown chakra, which is up here at the top. So we see the same thing right here. So here we have his crucifixion, and see she's pointing upwards. He's crucified, he's basically subdued his passion and selfishness, and now he's moving up. Here's another interesting church showing the red and blue, basically on opposite sides, but it's the same thing. We have the red representing the masculine, analytical, and we have the blue side representing the feminine. And we can see how that they have incorporated this dome structure into this with the brain right here. Here's another version of it right here. You can see red and blue again. Red and blue represents masculine, feminine. Notice this area that you see right here, and notice the way that the brain and the brain stem is. You're going to see a couple of really good examples here in just a second. Now, here's a really good example. So, I believe this one is in Chicago, I'm not sure. But this is, you can see where Jesus is crucified right here, right? And here you have this brain stem right here. And then right up here, you have them sitting on a throne. Well, that throne represents the same throne that's inside your head. Remember when I was talking about the triangle with the eye in the middle of it? Well, basically that is what you see right here, and that eye that is in the center of that is the pineal gland. It represents higher consciousness. And so when they say that they're sitting on the throne, this is what you're seeing right here. And let me show you, compared to ancient Egypt, what we've got going on. This is 5,000 years ago, and this is in a tomb and this basically, what they did was paint things on here of the Book of Coming Forth by Day, or the Book of the Dead, which is usually a misnomer of that. It's supposed to be called the Book of Coming Forth by Day. And as you can see, the ancient Egyptians, they also used alchemy. We can see that because we take a look at the two dogs here and their collars that we see. Their collars are basically following the cheekbones of a skull. And you can see that. And you can see that when you, And they did everything very proportionally, because you can see how the eyebrows follow the eye sockets, and then right where the third eye is, they're depicting the exact same thing. And they're showing the brain stem right here coming up. Now, the two lotus flowers that are basically tied in a knot represent the union of Upper and Lower Egypt. Spiritually, that basically means the upper and lower parts of the nervous system. But you have to understand that Lower Egypt is considered the upper part of the nervous system. It was just called Lower Egypt because the water flows to the north, just like Kundalini would flow up your spine, right? And so what we have right here, and I went ahead and just used something to show you the same thing, but you can see that these red areas right here represent the thalamus. Here is Isis showing this sun, which represents the pineal gland as well. We have the same thing going on right here. The dome basically represents the top of the skull. And what you have going on right in the center of the skull is you have the brain stem leading up to the Ark of the Covenant, where God sits on the throne. And the crucifixion, once again, and here's another picture showing how it looks where the brainstem is. You can see how there's a cross right here. So we have this crucifixion. At the top of that crucifixion, we have the tetragrammaton, or the eye in the triangle. And what this represents, I believe, to Kabbalists are the tetragrammaton. It represents a higher state of consciousness, but it also represents infinity in a way. And infinity is also represented, looks like a figure 8. What also looks like an infinity actually is a black hole on one side and the other, because it represents a vortex. And as we've seen so far, the center of the Orion Nebula is where a black hole is, and represents, it represents infinity, because once you move into that singularity, you're basically in God mode, right? Because you are, Jacob saw the name of the place. It was called Peniel. Basically, he saw God face to face, because when he moved into a singularity, he saw God. So what I wanted to show you and get out and show you about some of this stuff is it is very true, and I don't think it really can't be denied. And there are many instances, if you just go out there and look for it, you can see that the alchemy that you see right here was hidden in these churches. All of these things, like red and blue, the throne, the Ark of the Covenant. If you understand where your the human body is, especially the nervous system, the chakras and stuff like that, if you understand yourself and you understand the way the human body is, then pulling the alchemy out of these churches is a piece of cake. So the bottom line is the reason why we see all of these parallels, even though the details of some of these things. For example, Osiris was torn into 14 pieces. Mithra, not sure exactly how he was crucified or what have you. Jesus died on the cross. All these various things, right? But what happens is when you start taking a look into the alchemy, you start realizing that the same truth is being told all across culture. What is happening is they are translating it into words. In some cases, probably unknowingly, and in other cases as a means of control to keep people from understanding the divine they have within themselves. Because it's not about becoming God. It's about bettering yourself. It's about becoming closer to God. And the way that you do that is through the understandings of these teachings. It's not just to sit back and worship something and hope that you're going to be saved. That's not the way that it works. And that keeps people half conscious. And this goes for the left brain folks too. Left brain folks that are totally against spirituality, well, you guys should at least give your right brain expression enough chance to understand how this stuff works, because once you start seeing how it works, you start realizing that there is a scientific approach to understanding that, yes, the universe does actually communicate to people, and there is a lot of wisdom and knowledge to be gained if you can allow that kind of thing to happen, beyond what NASA and standard modern science has to offer. There is a spiritual side to it. And I believe Einstein once said that religion without science is blind, and science without religion is lame. When I use the word religion, I like to use the understanding that I mean spirituality, where I think religion is more tied to systems of you can't do this and you can do this. So with all that said, the art and the alchemy speak for themselves. What crucifixion actually is referring to, and by the way, I already showed you this, the knot of the lowest flower. That represents the same as crucifixion right here. And if you notice, it's in the same place as this that you see right here. All the alchemy that you see in these churches and so forth, it's they're all very telling, and it goes back 5,000 years. What we're doing today is no different. It's just that there's a lot of stuff that's been hidden from people, and one of the things I'm trying to do is to expose those secrets and hopefully empower people. So you guys take care. I'll talk to you soon.